Hi, I'm with Liam and his absolutely gorgeous Z4. Now,
She's saying that because she's my wife and she's meant to hold the microphone. Hello.
sorry about that.
Oh, look, I'm new at this, but my wife's even newer, so please bear with her.
Thank you.
She's going to attempt to interview me about our other BMW, a Z4.
Yep. Yes, I will. So, how long have you had this car, for the people that don't know?
Well, that's pretty much everyone except my brother over there who's behind the camera. I think I've had it about 5 years, and there's a bit of a story behind this particular car. We bought this sight unseen from a fellow called Rudy in South Australia. His wife owned it apparently, and she was a model, so has good breeding. And so we thought, well, at the time, I had my heart set on a SLK 500 AMG. That's the car I wanted. I looked and looked and looked, and in the end I started deciding it was the ones that were in reasonably good condition were too expensive and out of my price range, and the ones that I could afford were high kilometres, and you could see just, when you see damage on a car in photos online, you know that when you see it in physically it's going to be even worse. So I thought to myself, well, if I'm not going to get an AMG 500, what's the next best thing? And it turned out to be a BMW Z4. I specifically wanted a 6-cylinder. There's no way I was going to touch a 4-cylinder, but that's just my personal preference, and mainly because I like the sound of the 6-cylinder. And I know on some forums a lot of people debate the sound of the 6-cylinder BMWs being a bit of a drone, but I never get sick of it, to be honest with you. And sometimes we drive around with the radio switched off just so that we can listen to the motor. I know that sounds a bit stupid, but that's how we feel about it.
Do you want to tell us...
You've got another question.
I do, yes. Do you want to tell us a story about buying the car? I understand it wasn't from your home state of Victoria?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that. We bought it sight unseen from this fellow in South Australia. I saw it on a car website. Unfortunately, it wasn't Unique Cars and Parts, but I found it on another car website. I rang up the fellow and I had to negotiate with it over the phone. Being interstate, it was going to be an expensive idea to fly over there and have a look at the car personally. And for the price he was asking, I thought it was a bit of a bargain, and I needed to act fairly quickly. So I made the decision to try and negotiate over the phone, with the proviso that he would take it into the South Australian equivalent of the RACV at my expense, and have the thing seen to. And then their mechanic went over it, and I think it cost about $350. I got a full mechanical report. They went over the car from top to bottom, and they phoned me in the afternoon. I think they had it most of the day, and then told me every chip, well, there wasn't any, every scratch, none of those either, and every mechanical issue. I know it was a bit silly because the car had only done, I think, 12,500 kilometres, so it wasn't a high kilometre car, but you can't afford to make a mistake, and particularly you don't want to buy something that's been written off and repaired. And my heart was in my chest when I decided to spend the money, I tell you. But at the time, I organised to get it transported over again, sight unseen. The fellow I bought it off was kind enough to take it to a car transportation company, and they shipped it over to a depot to the west of Melbourne. And I remember borrowing my boss's car, or he actually drove me out there, and I had to wait at the side while they brought the car around, because you're not allowed into the compound where they keep all of the cars that they've transported. And they drove this round the corner, and my heart was beating so much. I was thinking, what have I done? This could be, who knows what this is and whether it's going to be any good. And he drove it around the corner, and the sigh of relief, I think, I didn't sigh physically, but I'm sure if anyone had been watching me, they would have seen the body just release, because I thought, oh my God, it's exactly as Rudy had described it. It's exactly as the RACV South Australian version had described it, and it's exactly as it looked in the pictures online. And I think one of the things that I fell in love with of this particular car, and one of the things I think was better than the AMG 500, was the interior. This one's got a wood grain interior, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. And I love the way they've done the dial treatment. They've got four of the HVAC controls across the front, and it's a sort of a throwback to the period when sports cars used to have gauges across the centre of the dash, and I really like that effect that it creates. I guess it's just a modern interpretation of something that was around probably 40 years ago. I remember my father owning a GT Cortina, and that, of course, had an instrument binnacle across the in the middle section. It had, from memory, 4 gauges, and obviously, in front of the driver, you had your tacho and your speedo. And these were the days when most cars didn't have a tacho. You were lucky to get a fuel gauge and a speedo. But I loved the interior. I thought it was great, and I've always been a bit of a fan of a long nose and a short tail. One of the things that endeared me to the Z4, apart from the silky smooth 6-cylinder under the hood, was the actual length of the hood. And I remember as a child watching The Great Leslie and loving that film. I just had to check with Professor Fate behind the camera to make sure I was getting that right.
What was the film?
It was The Great Race, and it had the Tony Curtis and Natalie Wood. And Jack Lemmon, I think, was Professor Fate. Anyway, one of the things, he had this wonderful car, and it had a huge snout on it with some sort of very, very big engine. I can't remember. But I loved that style, that look. And I think that the Z4 sort of replicates that in a way, this huge hood and short tail. And it's something that has endeared me to the look of this car. So I gave the looks to this, I gave the performance to the AMG 500, of course, but that said, I've never been disappointed with this particular car. The 6-cylinder's got ample power. This is the 3.0 S-Drive. There was only one model above this, and that had the turbo. I personally, I'm not a great fan of turbos, but I'm sure when I do own one, I will become a fan of turbos. But I've not missed it because I haven't had it to miss. And I know this thing develops so much power, and it's the pulling power and the torque on it is fantastic. And as I said earlier, just listening to the damn thing, when you're rocketing through some mountains and some twisty stuff, we go up to the Dandenongs quite a bit. Always keep it at the speed limit. But when we do give it a bit of a squirt, it does sound absolutely fantastic.
But it is auto, isn't it?
Look, BMW did make manuals. I do not believe any manuals made it to Australia. I'm happy to stand corrected on that. But from all of the ads when I was looking, and from everything I've been able to determine, it was the automatics that made it to Australia. The Z4 came in a myriad of different variations, but only a selected number of models made it to Australia because of the size of the population and the number that they'd be able to sell. So we didn't get all of the different variants that were possible. The US, of course, got manual as well as automatic, and they got lower spec versions as well. So this was all of the Z4s that came to Australia were sort of a mid-range to upper range specification. This thing has all you'd expect: sat nav, Bluetooth, all that sort of thing, and it's also got the ability on the button you can be away from your car and you can press the button and the roof will automatically come down without you having to sit in the car and press a button. We've only used it twice and we felt like wankers, to be honest, so we've never used that feature since, but it's there for the next owner when we do one day get round to selling it.
Thank you, Liam. It's a wonderful synopsis of a fabulous car, but I do have to ask the number plates. Can you give me the story on those?
Well, I'm surprised that you're asking, being my wife. They're your number plates.
They are, but the viewers don't understand. And
this is your car. The number plates, you'll see it on the video. I'll get another camera out. It says Godees with a Z on the end. My wife is a Melbourne supporter, and if you see Goodies, which is meant to be pronounced Godees, and maybe this year will be our year. That's what it's in relation to. Sometimes I think I need to put a little Melbourne badge on it because the number of people have come up to me and said, Goodies, what does that mean? And it means Godees.
Godees,
Go
I understand.
Melbourne.
Not me.
Just a quick shot of my brother who's admiring the Z4 after getting it of his little MG. I think he's realised he bought the wrong sports car, but we've got to be quiet. We don't want him to hear.